Hello everybody, welcome back to Popped In, your home for all things pop culture, and today we're doing yet another Lord of the Rings video. Now, I kind of alluded to this one in the last video I did talking about the hunt for Gollum, and this is going to be a ranking of all the characters from, or not all, but many of the main characters from Lord of the Rings based on how likely I think they are to appear in the hunt for Gollum. So as you can see, we got characters that are confirmed. There's only a couple that are confirmed, but it's like there's no point in guessing them because it's pretty much, if it's not been confirmed officially, like an actor has said something. Then we go on, so I think are very likely to appear in the movie. Like, it would make sense for them to, in like story-wise, or maybe in the canon from the books they were involved. Then we got characters that I think possibly could return. There are ones that are unlikely. They're not impossible, but there's not a great chance. And then there's ones that I think there's no shot that they appear in this movie. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, let's just get started with, we can go ahead and put the ones that are confirmed. Of course, the hunt for Gollum will have Gollum in the movie. That's been confirmed already. And we have pretty sure confirmation, or no, it is confirmation because Ian McKellen said both Gandalf and Frodo are appearing in the movie. We just don't know who is playing them. I'm assuming and hoping it's Ian McKellen and Elijah Wood because it would feel weird for it to be anyone else. And like I said in the last video, I think they could pull it off with, makeup, CGI, whatever it is. And I forgot to mute my phone. I always do that. Holy crap, it's not muting. Okay, there we go. But yeah, those are the three that have been confirmed. So everyone else is kind of up in the air at this point. So we'll just start and go through the list here. So Aragorn, I think he's probably the most you can get to confirmed without being confirmed because the whole story is Gandalf sending Aragorn to hunt for Gollum. So unless they drastically depart from that in the source material, there's no way Aragorn doesn't appear. And there's already been talks of, will Viggo Mortensen come back? It would just be very hard to tell the story without Aragorn. And it would upset so many people if they changed that from the source material. So yeah, Aragorn will be a very large part of the story, I am guessing. So then we have Arwen. I think there's a possibility she shows up because her connection with Aragorn, of course, we know from the movies they have a past. They grew up together. That's where their love kind of started before the movies. So I definitely could see her appearing. I'm not really sure. I'm not too familiar on the lore outside of the movie, so I'm not sure how long it had been since they'd seen each other last before they saw one another in Fellowship of the Ring. But I think there's a possibility that she could return. And, with Liv Tyler coming back to the MCU as Betty Ross, I think she'd be more than happy to come back for this if she came back for that. So, yeah, Arwen, I think, definitely has a possibility of coming. Then we have Boromir. Some of these characters like Boromir are interesting because on the surface, they shouldn't come back. But based on like what they've done with The Hobbit and even the War of the Rohirrim, the anime movie, of bringing some characters in, I would have said no shot for Boromir, but I'll put it in unlikely just because there is a world where I can see the hunt for Gollum kind of ends with them sending out like a call, like, hey, we're going to have a gathering because they know everything's going on with the ring. Kind of like a Rogue One type of situation with Star Wars, how it ends with all the characters coming together for A New Hope with Leia on the run, Darth Vader chasing her. I could see a world where the hunt for Gollum ends with whoever sending out like a call like, hey, we got to get all the free people of Middle-earth together. We got to have a council and discuss what we got to do with the ring because Sauron is after it. Because he knows that the hobbits have it. And I could see them doing like a little montage and Boromir leaving Gondor to come and partake in the council. So that's the only way I really see Boromir appearing. There's no other way. So it's very unlikely, but it's not no shot, I don't think. Then we have Thorne's Company. Now, these guys are pretty much a no shot. I would love to see them. I just recently started watching back through the Hobbit trilogy, and this is such a fun cast of characters. But, of course, Thorin, Fili, and Keely, they're all dead. As far as the timeline goes, I would think Balin would have already died in Moria. I'm not sure, though. But I could the only way I would see them appear is if like we get like a throwaway like scene of like one of the dwarves doing something, or like I mentioned with Boromir, Glowin, he is at the Council of Elrond, so maybe he would show up in some way. But I don't really see any way where they return other than a cameo like that. So then we have Elrond, and I'm gonna put Elrond. This is very tough. It's between these two because we already got Hugo Weaving back in The Hobbit, and as I said, I'm expecting this to have a lot of ties leading into the Fellowship of the Ring, and even more than characters showing up for the Council, Elrond is going to be one of the main integral characters that, is kind of orchestrating this. So it'd be like if Rogue One didn't have Mon Mothma or Bail Organa or something, because they're like one of the foundational parts of that. So I'm going to put Elrond in very likely. I feel like they're kind of like a package deal, him and Arwen. Like, if we see Elrond, I don't know why we wouldn't see Arwen because she's around Rivendell at the same time. But I think there may be, if it's just like one scene of like Gandalf talking to him, I think we get at least that, if not a larger role. So I'm going to put Elrond in very likely because, like I said, I think he's going to be kind of orchestrating this whole like council and everything. Of course, we see that in the Fellowship of the Ring. Then we have Galadriel. I want to put her in very likely as well because, similarly with Elrond, how big of a role she had in the Hobbit movies with Gandalf and Saruman and everything with the council. Or I guess they're the White Council at the time, I believe. So I could definitely see her appearing, but the only problem is at this time she might be more staying in Lothlorien, because we didn't see her in Rivendell in the Fellowship of the Ring, so I don't know why there'd be that much of a difference there. But the fact that she did appear in The Hobbit, and of course everything with the Rings of Power, and Cate Blanchett is one of the biggest names in the Lord of the Rings franchise. So I think she has a high shot of returning. I'll put her in very likely. I feel like she'd be a character that definitely has a chance to return. Then we have Gimli, and as iconic a character as Gimli is, we know we got a reference to him in the Hobbit movies, but I think he's kind of in the same camp as Boromir. We might get like a scene at the end where he's riding out with Glowin to the Council of Elrond, but I don't think he'd have much more of a role than that, especially with John Rhys Davies. He's one of the older members of this cast. I think we possibly will see him, but it'll be a very minor role, and because it's so minor, I think it goes from possibly to unlikely. Legolas, on the other hand, I'm going to say very likely. I think it's very likely that we see Legolas. Of course, in Fellowship of the Ring, we see before, like, there's some history between Legolas and Aragorn with how quickly Legolas jumps to his defense against Boromir at the council and everything. And the fact, again, we saw him in the Hobbit movies, I think they don't miss a chance to bring Legolas back. Orlando Bloom has already come out and said he wants to play Legolas again. So I think there's a very, very good shot that Legolas comes back. And possibly, this could be something that would upset people, I think. But I could possibly see them making this like a duo movie of Aragorn and Legolas hunting for Gollum, more so than just Aragorn. People might be upset about that, but I think that could possibly happen, and I honestly wouldn't be that upset because, yeah, Legolas kind of got wrote into The Hobbit more than he possibly should have been, but I feel like this would kind of make more sense than The Hobbit did, but that's just me. Then we have Merry and Pippin. I'm going to put them in unlikely. The reason why I think we would see them is since we do have Frodo confirmed to return, we're going to be around the Shire and everything. And there's a possibility, like, maybe in one scene they're talking to Frodo or something. I'm wanting to lean more to possibly just because Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd both came back for War of the Rohirrim to voice some orcs. So obviously they're into returning. And they are some of the actors that haven't been able to reprise their roles as Merry and Pippin because they weren't in the Hobbit movies. So I'm going to lean possibly, actually. I think there's a chance that they return. I think we might see a bit more of the Shire in like a prelude or whatever, like we did in The Hobbit. And if we're seeing Frodo, I think there's a chance we could see some more of these Hobbit characters. So, and then we have the Nazgul. I think it's probably very likely we see them at least one time in this movie because they're the main ones. I might be misremembering. I'm pretty sure they played a part in hunting Gollum for Sauron's side. So I think we might see a couple of them possibly hunting for Gollum. Maybe even they fight with Aragorn at one point in the movie. Not sure, but I think there's a very likely possibility that we see the Ringwraiths in some fashion in this movie. Then Sam, I'm going to put him in possibly as well. Similarly to Merry and Pippin, we have... Did Sam? I don't think he appeared in the Hobbit movies. He may have appeared in the last one. But I think he's got a higher shot of appearing than Merry and Pippin if Frodo's there. But I think they're closer together than, being in very likely. So, yeah, I do think Sam has a good shot of appearing, though, but not as good as these characters. Then we have Saruman. And if this would have come out around the time of the Hobbit movies, I would have said possibly or very likely. But I'm going to put him in unlikely just because of the passing of Christopher Lee. They brought him back in the War of the Rohirrim, but they just took archival voice lines from Christopher Lee to voice Saruman. And bring him back in live action, you'd be going into the whole, CGI recreation route. Not sure, the estate of Christopher Lee, if they'd sign off on that, the reaction they would get. And because Elrond and Galadriel are appearing, I think he has a shot. But the only plus side in this whole equation is the fact that at this point, Saruman is probably becoming more and more aligned with Sauron. So if Christopher Lee was still alive, I think we would get a scene of him maybe talking with Gandalf, but they have some hint that, hey, Saruman, he's evil now. But we might just get him mentioned in a voice line, but I don't think we're going to see Saruman in this movie. As much as I hate it, but I think it's probably for the best since Christopher Lee cannot play him. Yeah. Then we have Sauron. I think it's very likely in some capacity, not necessarily this form of Sauron, but we're going to see the Eye of Sauron at some point in this movie. There's no doubt about it. Or he'll get mentioned, which, yeah, he's not appearing, but Sauron is going to be a presence in this movie, whether we see the Eye of Sauron or not. But, yeah, I'm going to put him very likely just for that, because his presence will be felt, I'm sure. Then we have some Hobbit characters to close it out. We've got Bilbo Baggins. I'm going to put him in possibly. Again, if Ian Holm was still alive, I'd have him in very likely, because if we're seeing Frodo and Gandalf, I think Bilbo would appear with them. But because Ian Holm is not alive, I would not be opposed to having Martin Freeman reprise the role. The only problem is trying to age him up to a point. I think they could do it, and I'd be fine. I'd rather have Martin Freeman than recasting someone, because he is older now. Not as old as Ian Holm was, but I would 100% be fine with Martin Freeman playing Bilbo again. But I'll put him in possibly just because I'm not sure if they would do that or not, but I would love to see him come back as Bilbo. Then we have Toriel. It's between unlikely and no shot. I say no shot just because, her inclusion, I don't think people really disliked her. It was just the stuff that came along with it. It was just expanding the book more than they needed to, and it was creating a new character. So because of that, I'm not sure they'd bring her back, but if they go all in, I could see her maybe appearing with Legolas if he's not in as large of a role as Aragorn. And possibly she could die. That could explain why she's not around in Lord of the Rings. But I don't know. I think there's probably more of a shot that she just doesn't appear. And they kind of just maybe would have a mention of her. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think she has much of a shot of appearing. Then we have Thranduil. I'll put him in unlikely. Just because, again, kind of like these characters with The Hobbit, they're not as attached to this story. But I think similarly, I've said similarly so many times this episode, and I just keep messing up more and more. Like Boromir and Gimli. Oh my gosh. I think we could see him in a shot like towards the end, like a montage or something, him sending Legolas to the council. But just because he hasn't been in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, they might just start with Legolas and not include Thranduil, so that's why I'm putting him in unlikely. And yeah, I think he has a better shot than the dwarves or Tauriel, but unlikely feels like a good place for him. So yeah, that is the tier list, how I think this will shake out. So I think these characters all could easily move up, and especially once we get more castings, you know, they might say, hey, all the Hobbit actors are returning, so we'd know for sure. But yeah, this is the way I see it right now. There's a couple other characters I'd thought of including, like someone like Treebeard or King Theoden or Eowyn or Eomer or somebody like that. But I think those all would have been an unlikely to no shot just because this story, they don't make sense. All these characters, depending on how far they want to take the story, they could make sense, be it being in Rivendell, being in the Shire, or being sent out to tie it in to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So there's a wide variety of things they could do here, and this is just basing it off what I think could happen, but this could be entirely wrong. So let me get, like I said it last time too, let me know what you guys think of who will appear, if you think any of these characters might appear more than I'm giving them credit, or if you think some that I may have and very likely will not appear. So let me know what you guys think. I enjoy talking to you guys in the comments. So, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Lets me know you guys enjoy the content. And yeah, I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.